name's Robert Manduca, and I'm an assistant professor of sociology at the University of Michigan. And today I'm going to be talking with you about geographic inequality in the United States. So as many of you know, the United States is a land of economic contrasts. So on the one hand, we have places like the San Francisco Bay Area, pictured on the left here, which are some of the richest cities or richest regions in the history of the world. And on the other hand, there are many other urban areas and also rural areas that are economically struggling and dealing with the decline of local industries and rising unemployment. And one feature of the geographic inequality of the United States is that it's actually gotten quite a bit worse over time. So this is a map of the United States in 1980, and each metropolitan area, which is a group of counties centered around a single commuting zone, commuting shed, is colored according to the average income of among its residents in 1980. And what you can see here is that there are a few places, most notably Washington, D.C. and New York, that are quite a bit richer than average, where the mean income is more than 20% greater than the nation as a whole. Also, Alaska falls in that category. There are also a few more places, many rural areas, especially in the Southeast, that were substantially poorer than average, with average incomes less than 80% of the national average. But most of the country is colored in these three middle colors, indicating that the average income for residents of that metropolitan area was roughly in line with the national average overall. However, if you look a little bit more recently, if we zoom forward to 2013, you can see that there's been a bifurcation. So on the one hand, there are more cities, more metropolitan areas in the top category. You can see that the whole East Coast, as well as Northern California and Minneapolis, St. Paul, all are more than 20% richer in terms of their mean income compared to the rest of the country or the United States overall. While on the other hand, a lot more places are in the bottom category. So you can see that many rural areas, not just in the South, but also in the Northwest and the Northeast, in the Southwest, all fall into this bottom category of being more than 20% poorer on average than the country. And so what this means is that we're having, instead of having one sort of standard of living that most places in the United States experience, we're seeing this bifurcation where there's increasingly some very rich places and some very poor places, and fewer places in between. So just to give you a sense of scale, in 1980, about 10% of the US population lived in a metropolitan area that was either in the top category or the bottom category, either substantially richer or substantially poorer than the country overall. And in 2013, about 30% lived in such an area. So there's been a tripling of the population in the extreme ends of the income distribution geographically over the past 40 years. And so a major question that academics and others and policymakers are interested in is, why has geographic inequality gone up? Is this something about local leadership, decisions that are being made by community members in different parts of the country? Is it about changes in who lives where, or perhaps due to differences in the ability to access lifestyle amenities? Or maybe it's something bigger. Maybe it's about changes in technology, changes in the global economy, or something to do with national level policy. And today what I'm going to share with you is two recent findings from academic research on this topic that shed some light on what is driving growing geographic inequality in the US. So first, this is from research that I've been conducting myself. A first finding is that growing geographic inequality and growing overall inequality are very closely intertwined. So in a research paper, what I did is I ran simulations to try to understand how much of the growth in geographic inequality since 1980 is about changes in what types of people, or specifically what income levels of people are living in what metropolitan areas, and how much of the growth in geographic inequality is about just changes in the overall income distribution and how much money people at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom are taking home as a fraction of the national need. And just to set this up, what I'm showing here is the true observed value. This is a measure of spatial inequality called the coefficient of variation. And you can see that it grew from about 0.125, 0.13 in 1980 to a high of just over 0.2 in 2013. So this was an increase of roughly 50% or so over these 40 years. And this orange line shows what would have happened if nothing had happened, if it had just stayed totally steady. So in a first simulation, I asked what would have happened if The total amount of inequality in the country in the national level income distribution had stayed the same, but the places where different people had lived had changed. So that's what this line shows, and you can see that if we just look at the effect of sorting in terms of who lives where or what level of income people at what point in the income distribution live where, you can see that there would have been an increase in inequality. But overall, particularly after the 1980s, starting in the 1990s and beyond, the effect is relatively small compared to the total rise in geographic inequality. It's maybe a quarter or something like that. On the other hand, if we look only at the effect of rising inequality nationally, we can see that that explains a much bigger percentage of the overall increase. A little bit over half. That's what's shown in this line here, and you can see that it's a steady increase rather than an up and a down. So from this exercise, we can take away that the growth of geographic inequality is very closely tied to the growth of the rise in income inequality overall. What this means is that as we think about ways to try to bring the different parts of the country into closer alignment, reducing inequality in general will also have the effect of reducing inequality between places. So we should be thinking about policies not just to target specific places, but also to just sort of narrow the income distribution overall. And that leads me into a second finding, or second set of of results that a wide range of scholars have started publishing on or started documenting, which is that seemingly place neutral, specifically federal policies, when we're thinking about economic policies, can have, even if they seem like there's something that applies to the entire country overall, they can have really varied and geographically concentrated impacts on different places. So some examples of this, you can think of something like antitrust enforcement, which is talked about a lot in the news right now. And that doesn't necessarily seem at first to be a geographically sort of weighted or targeted policy, but it does affect the level of geographic inequality, because when you think about how many companies exist in a given industry, well, each of those companies is going to have a headquarters. They might be in different cities. They're going to employ a set of people locally, and so as the number of companies that are competing in a given industry goes down, we might also see a geographic concentration of that industry's profile, especially if we're thinking about sort of the high-paying headquarters type jobs. Other examples might be things like transportation regulation. So how easy is it to get to different places? This used to be an area where the federal government was very proactive about trying to ensure that it's sort of similarly easy to get to places of similar size, no matter where they are in the country. It did that through communications, through regulation of railroads and airlines and other forms of transportation, these sorts of things, through the construction of new highways and new railroads. That's something that the government has stepped back on in recent years. Also, things like trade policy. So, when we change the tariffs on a given set of industries, that will affect the places that make those products, where those industries are located. And as well, you can think of things like social transfers and federal investment, where these are spending by the federal government for a means that's not for a purpose that's not necessarily directly geographically targeted. It could be we want to reduce poverty in general, or we want to protect our borders, or develop new technologies, or connect different parts of the country. Those aren't necessarily inherently geographic goals, but because of the way that actions by the federal government or by or economic changes in general will have different impacts on different places, they can have the effect of either reducing or increasing geographic inequality. So just as an example of this is a map from Two Economists. So I should show this map was not created by geographers, so you can rest assured that we can get the projections straightened out. But this is a map created by economists Otterdorn and Hansen, showing exposure to changes in exposure to international trade competition. And you can see that this is specifically looking at the effect of reduced trade barriers with China over the period 1990 to 2007. And you can see that even though the trade barriers were lowered for the entire country at the same time, because of the types of industries that were located in different places, they had very different impacts on different regions of the country. So you can say there's big concentrations in parts of the South, Midwest, and Northeast, and less exposure in much of the West. So as far as takeaways, what this means, it means that we can reduce geographic inequality in the process of meeting other national challenges. So there's a lot of things that the United States is working on or that are occupying our attention right now, and geographic inequality is just one of these issues. But I think fortunately, because of how universal policies or federal policies made at the national level can still have different impacts in different places, there's hope for reducing geographic inequality at the same time as we meet other national challenges. So thanks so much. That's the end of the talk. And I hope you'll stay in touch. So you can find my website and my email here. Thank you.